Hey there, spooky friends. Welcome to a world where shadows dance and whispers linger. Tonight, I have a chilling tale for you, one that will keep you on the edge of your seat. It's the story of the night I met the Grim Reaper, and trust me, it's a wild ride. As you listen, don't forget to let me know where you're tuning in from in the comments. And guess what? I have something special just for you. Click the link in the description below to learn more. Now, let's dive into the darkness together. It was a rainy night, the kind where the drops tapped softly on the window like tiny fingers trying to get my attention. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange mix of comfort and unease. The sound of rain was soothing, but there was something else in the air, a feeling that something was coming. I tried to close my eyes and drift off to sleep, but the shadows in my room seemed to move. I could see them flickering in the dim light, twisting and turning like they were alive. My heart started to race. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, hoping it would protect me from whatever was lurking in the dark. Suddenly, I heard a soft creak. It was the kind of sound that makes your skin crawl. I sat up in bed, my eyes wide open. The door to my room was slightly ajar, and I could see a dark figure standing there. I blinked, thinking it was just my imagination, but the figure didn't go away. It stayed there watching me. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it stepped closer and I could see it more clearly. It was tall, dressed in a long, dark cloak that seemed to swallow the light around it. I felt a chill run down my spine. This was no ordinary visitor. "Do not be afraid," it said in a voice that was both soft and echoing, like a whisper carried by the wind. "I am here to take you on a journey." I didn't understand. A journey? Where? I wanted to run, but my legs felt heavy. I was frozen in place, unable to look away from the figure. It took another step forward and I could see its face. It was pale, with hollow eyes that seemed to look right through me. I realized then that I was staring at the Grim Reaper. "Why are you here?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not ready to go anywhere." The Grim Reaper tilted its head, and I could feel a strange pull, like it was inviting me to follow. "You have much to see, little one. There are stories in the shadows, and I am the keeper of those tales." I swallowed hard. I didn't want to hear any scary stories. I just wanted to be safe in my bed. But the rain kept pouring outside, and the darkness felt thicker, wrapping around me like a blanket. There was something about the Reaper that was both terrifying and oddly comforting. "Come," it urged, extending a bony hand towards me. "Let me show you the world beyond your dreams." Before I could think, I found myself standing up. My feet moved on their own, and I stepped closer to the figure. The room around me began to fade, the walls melting away into darkness. I felt a rush of wind, and suddenly, we were standing in a place that felt both familiar and strange. We were in a forest, but it wasn't like any forest I had ever seen. The trees were tall and twisted, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The ground was covered in fog that swirled around my ankles, making it hard to see where I was stepping. I felt a shiver run through me, but I was too curious to turn back now. "Welcome to the Forest of Whispers," the Grim Reaper said, its voice echoing through the trees. "Here, the stories of the lost and forgotten come alive." As we walked deeper into the forest, I could hear faint whispers floating through the air. They sounded like voices, but I couldn't make out the words. I looked up at the Reaper, and it nodded, encouraging me to listen. "Each whisper is a story," it explained. "A tale of fear, loss, and sometimes hope." I felt a knot form in my stomach. What kind of stories were hidden here? I didn't want to find out, but a part of me was drawn to the mystery. The whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a storm. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the fog. It was a girl no older than me, with wide, frightened eyes. She looked lost, her clothes tattered and dirty. "Help me," she cried, reaching out towards us. "I can't find my way home." I felt a surge of sympathy for her. "What happened?" I asked, stepping closer. But before she could answer, the Grim Reaper raised a hand, stopping me. "Do not approach her," it warned. "She is a lost soul, trapped in this forest. Her story is one of sorrow." "Please," the girl begged, her voice trembling. "I just want to go home." I wanted to help her, but I could feel the weight of the Reaper's presence beside me. "What should I do?" I whispered, feeling the fear creeping back in. "Sometimes it is best to let go," the Reaper replied softly. "Not all stories end happily." The girl's face twisted in despair, and she began to fade into the fog. I reached out, but it was too late. She was gone, leaving only the whispers behind. My heart ached for her, but I could feel the truth in the Reaper's words. Some stories were meant to be left untold. We continued walking, the forest growing darker around us. Each step felt heavier and the whispers turned into cries. I could see shadows darting between the trees, their forms shifting and changing. It was as if the forest itself was alive, filled with the spirits of those who had been lost. Why are they here? I asked, my voice shaking. Why can't they find peace? They are bound to their stories, the Reaper explained. Each soul carries the weight of their past. They cannot move on until their tales are told. I felt a chill run through me. What if I became one of them? What if I was trapped in this forest forever? The thought made me want to run, but the Reaper's presence kept me rooted to the spot. Come, it said, leading me further into the darkness. There is more to see. As we walked, I noticed a flickering light ahead. It looked like a candle, glowing softly in the gloom. I felt drawn to it, and as we approached, I could see a small clearing filled with strange, twisted trees. In the center stood an old woman, her face lined with age and sorrow. Welcome, child, she said, her voice warm yet haunting. I have been waiting for you. Who are you? I asked, feeling a mix of fear and curiosity. The Grim Reaper stood silently beside me, watching. I am the storyteller, she replied, gesturing to the trees around us. Each tree holds a story, a memory of those who have passed. Would you like to hear one? I hesitated. Part of me was terrified, but another part was curious. What kind of stories? I asked. Stories of love, loss, and the choices we make, she said, her eyes sparkling with an otherworldly light. They are the tales that bind us all. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. Okay, I want to hear. The old woman smiled and placed her hand on one of the trees. The bark shimmered, and I could see images swirling within. It was like a movie playing out in front of me. I watched as a young couple laughed and danced under the moonlight, their faces filled with joy. But then the scene shifted. The laughter faded, and I saw the couple arguing, their love turning to anger. Sometimes love can turn dark, the storyteller said softly. Every choice has a consequence. I felt a knot in my stomach as the couple's story ended in heartbreak. The images faded, leaving only the tree standing tall and silent. I turned to the Reaper, hoping for comfort, but it remained still, its expression unreadable. Do you see? The storyteller asked. Every story has its light and shadow. It is the balance of life. I nodded, trying to understand. But what happens to them now? I asked, glancing back at the tree. Will they be trapped here forever? They must find their way, the old woman replied. Some will learn, while others will remain lost. The weight of her words hung in the air, and I felt a chill creep down my spine. I didn't want to be lost. I wanted to find my way back home. Can we go now? I asked the Reaper, my voice trembling. I don't want to stay here anymore. The Grim Reaper nodded, and I felt a rush of relief. Very well, it said. But remember, the stories you have seen will always be with you. As we turned to leave, the whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a storm. I could hear the cries of the lost souls, their voices echoing through the trees. I wanted to cover my ears, but I couldn't escape the haunting melody. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see the girl from before, her eyes wide and pleading. Help me, she cried again. I don't want to be lost. My heart raced as I looked at the Grim Reaper. Can we help her? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. The Reaper shook its head. She must find her own way. You cannot save her. Tears filled my eyes as I watched the girl fade into the fog once more. I felt helpless, the weight of her sorrow pressing down on me. It's not fair. I shouted, my voice breaking. Why can't we help them? Life is not always fair, the Reaper replied softly. But every soul has the power to choose their own path. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. But what if they choose wrong? I asked, my voice trembling. Then they must learn, the Reaper said. And sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the greatest growth. As we stepped back into the darkness, I felt a strange sense of understanding. The forest was filled with stories, each one a lesson waiting to be learned. I didn't want to be lost, but I knew I had to face my own fears. The rain continued to fall outside, the sound echoing in my ears. I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me, but I also felt a flicker of hope. I could choose my own path just like the souls in the forest. As we walked, I could see the light of my room shining in the distance. I felt a rush of relief knowing I was almost home. But just as I reached out for the light, the whispers grew louder and shadows danced around me. Wait! I cried, feeling a pull back into the darkness. I don't want to go back. The Grim Reaper turned to me, its eyes glowing in the dark. You cannot escape your story, it said, but you can choose how it unfolds. With those words, I felt a surge of determination. I didn't want to be lost. I wanted to find my way. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next. As I crossed the threshold, the darkness began to fade and I found myself back in my room. The rain still tapped softly against the window, and the shadows were just shadows again. I felt a mix of relief and sadness, knowing I had left the forest behind but carrying its stories with me. I lay back in bed, my heart still racing. The Grim Reaper's words echoed in my mind, and I knew I would never forget the night I met it. The stories of the lost would stay with me, guiding me as I faced my own path. And as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was still out there, waiting for me to return. The stories would always be there, whispering in the dark, reminding me that every choice I made would shape my journey. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the night settle around me. The rain continued to fall, a soothing lullaby that carried me into dreams filled with shadows and whispers, where the tales of the lost and forgotten would forever linger. As I lay in bed, the night wrapped around me like a cold blanket. I tried to calm my racing heart. The shadows in the corners of my room felt darker, deeper, as if they were hiding something sinister. I couldn't shake the images of the forest from my mind. The old woman's face, the lost girl, and those chilling whispers haunted me. What had I witnessed? Soon, I heard a slight rustling sound coming from the corner. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. But then the sound grew louder, like fingers scratching against the floor. My eyes darted toward the noise, heart pounding against my chest. What if the shadows from the forest had followed me home? I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to forget about the whispers and the lost souls. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, hoping to feel safe. But the rustling wouldn't stop. The noise came closer and I could hear something breathing, slow and heavy like a drum. "Please go away," I whispered to the darkness. A cold wind suddenly blew through the room, making me shiver. My eyes snapped open, and to my horror, I saw dark shapes swirling at the edge of my vision. They twisted and turned like smoke, creeping along the walls, wrapping around my bed in an icy embrace. I squeezed my eyes shut again, trying to block it all out. The air grew thick, almost suffocating. I could feel a presence, a heavy weight pressing down on me like a body pinning me to the mattress. I couldn't breathe. Panic rose inside me, clawing at my throat. I opened my eyes just a crack, hoping to see my familiar room. But instead, the shadows moved like creatures, slithering toward me, their forms shifting and grotesque. I wanted to scream, but fear lodged in my throat. As I stared, the shadows began to morph into faces, twisted, anguished faces of people who looked lost and angry. Their mouths moved, silently screaming words I could not hear. "Help us," a faint voice echoed, chilling me to the bone. "We are trapped." I tried to sit up, to run away from this nightmare, but I couldn't move. It was like the shadows wrapped around my limbs, holding me in place. I could feel their icy breath on my skin, a shiver running down my spine. My heart raced wildly as I fought against the invisible bonds constricting me. Just when I thought I would be swallowed whole, I remembered the Grim Reaper from the forest. I focused on its words. "You cannot escape your story, but you can shape it." Drawing on that thought, I mustered all my strength and called out, "Let me go." With those words, I felt a sudden rush of warmth, like light piercing through the dark fog. The shadows recoiled for a moment, and I saw fear in their twisted faces. I pushed harder against the darkness, my voice growing stronger as I shouted, "I am not afraid of you." The shadows retreated, swirling around before disappearing like wisps of smoke. I gasped as the pressure on my chest lifted and the air cleared. I sat up, panting and trembling, glancing around my now quiet room. But then I heard it again. A low, haunting moan echoed from the corner, vibrating through the air. My heart sank as I turned my head, dread pooling in my stomach. The shadows hadn't gone. They had merely shifted, lingering just out of sight. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice shaking. The response was chilling. The shadows danced in front of me, revealing glimpses of their stories, flickers of light showing moments of their lives, but all intertwined with terror. One figure stepped forward, its face twisted in sorrow, mouth moving silently in desperation. "Help us. We need your light," it whispered, and my heart ached with the sadness in its voice. I felt the urge to reach out, to offer my help as I had with the girl in the forest, but fear held me back. "How am I supposed to help you?" The figures flickered, gathering their energy, and in a rush, the images surged into one another. Wedding days turned to funerals, laughter drowned by screams, memories distorted by grief. It was a whirlwind of emotions, too much to comprehend. Then I remembered the Grim Reaper's words about choice. You have to tell your stories. I yelled out into the darkness, finding my courage again. You have to let go. In a heartbeat, the shadows froze. They turned their glimmering eyes toward me, and I could see their anguish reflected there. They were caught between what had happened to them and what they could not escape. The sorrow in the air was palpable. The wailing grew louder, engulfing me in a cacophony of loss. I felt a deep sympathy for them, realizing that they were not just shadows, but souls trapped in their own memories. I can't do this alone, I whispered, my heart breaking for them. I need your help too. Then suddenly, a bright light burst through my window, cutting through the darkness like a knife. The shadows tightened around me, trembling as they turned toward the light. I saw glimmers of hope in their eyes as they caught sight of it. Their whispers turned to gasps, and the heavy air began to lift. Let it in, I urged, feeling the warmth of the light wrapping around me. This is our chance. In that moment, a flood of warmth enveloped the room. The shadows shrank back and I could see their true forms, people like me, lost and fragile. Their faces began to soften, the torment washing away as they turned towards the light. One shadow stepped forward, a young boy with sorrowful eyes. He looked up at me and smiled faintly, a hint of gratitude breaking through his sadness. Thank you, he whispered, his voice a mere echo of the pain he had felt. You can help us find peace. The light grew brighter, shimmering like stars falling from the skies. With each passing moment, the shadows began to change, stories spilling from their mouths in a rush of emotions. I could hear fragments of their lives, the love they lost, the mistakes they made. As I listened, I realized that they just needed someone to hear them, to acknowledge the weight of their stories. I felt an overwhelming surge of compassion towards them. Tell me your stories, I encouraged, my voice breaking through the noise of their anguish. I will listen. The shadows began to speak, one by one. I listened intently, letting their tales wash over me. A woman spoke of her lost child, her heart heavy with grief. The boy shared a story of a friend he betrayed, regret hanging in the air. Each story carried echoes of pain, but also lessons, reminders of how we must live, love, and forgive. As I listened, I could see the heaviness lifting from their forms. The secrets they kept for so long began to dissolve in the warmth of the light, and their faces brightened, filled with a clarity they hadn't had before. They were sharing their burdens, lightening their souls. But then I noticed something shifting in the peripheral darkness, shapes emerging at the edges, angry and restless. They looked different from the others, their eyes glowing red and filled with rage. I felt fear creeping back into my chest. Beware, the shadows warned, their voices trembling. These are the others, the ones who refused to let go. As the angry shadows drew closer, I felt a chill settle over me. Their howling filled the room, growing louder and more violent. They want to trap you, the boy shouted, pulling away from the grip of the dark ones. You have to leave. Heart racing, I glanced back at the swirling masses, and they surged forward, lunging towards me with a hunger that felt all-consuming. The warmth from the light began to fade, replaced by the cold grip of despair. I didn't have time to think. You have to fight. I called to the kind shadows around me, knowing they had lived in darkness for so long. You can push the darkness away. Together we surged forward, voices rising, merging into a roar. The light flickered, responding to our courage, bursting forth with renewed strength. I felt it fill me, powerful and warm. Let the light in, I shouted, raising my arms. The shadows rallied around me, finding their courage too. We charged toward the angry figures, plunging headfirst into the darkness. The chill pierced through the air, and as we collided, time seemed to stop. A blinding flash ignited, exploding around us. The angry shadows shrieked in fury, their forms writhing and screaming as the light consumed them. I felt the heaviness slipping away, like a weight being lifted from my heart. In that moment, I closed my eyes, letting the light wash over me like a wave. The darkness fell back, losing its grip as the warm radiance shattered their hold, turning them into flickers of smoke that faded into nothingness. As the silence returned, I opened my eyes. The kind shadows surrounded me, their forms glowing in soft light. I could see smiles on their faces, radiant and free. The fear and sadness that had once consumed them faded into the air, drifting away like mist. Thank you, the boy said, his voice no longer a whisper but strong and clear. You saved us. I could feel my heart swell with joy. We had fought together, and in doing so, I had not only helped them but found strength in myself too. The darkness that had haunted me was a reminder of the light I carried within. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just the end. There were still stories left to tell, shadows still waiting to be uncovered. I took a deep breath, looking around at my new friends, knowing that this was only the beginning of our journey together. The light in the room glimmered brightly, promising hope. I felt the pull to explore the stories beyond my dreams and the memories left in the forest, a new adventure waiting just outside. And as I turned back towards the window, I knew that this night would not be forgotten. I was no longer just a scared child in bed, I was a keeper of stories, a guide through the darkness. And somewhere, in the vast shadows beyond, the Grim Reaper would be waiting, ready to take me deeper into the haunting tales that still lurked, waiting to be heard. As I stood in the glowing light with the freed shadows around me, a mix of excitement and dread washed over me. I realized I had uncovered so many dark tales, but there were still more lurking in the corners of my mind and the world outside. The warmth of the shadows felt comforting, but deep down, I sensed a lingering unease. Outside my window, the night still stretched endlessly, dark and full of secrets. Those angry shadows that had attacked us could return. I had to prepare for the darkness that always seemed ready to strike. What should we do now? I asked, the others looking at me with shining eyes, shimmering with hope and determination. The boy stepped forward. We have to keep the light alive. There are still souls trapped in the shadows out there. They need our help. His words hung in the air, heavy and real. I felt the weight of responsibility settle on me. I had just begun to understand the stories that could haunt, and the faces of those who were still waiting to be freed filled my thoughts. But how do we find them? I wondered aloud. We have to go back, one of the older shadows said, her voice steady yet tinged with sadness. Back to where the darkness takes hold the most. I swallowed hard. The thought of returning to that place of anguish sent shivers down my spine. But I knew I couldn't turn away now. I had seen their pain, I had heard their cries. I had to do this. We will face them together, I replied, the flicker of courage igniting in my chest. Let's go. The shadows nodded in agreement, and I could feel the energy between us growing brighter. We all gripped hands, forming a chain of light, and with a deep breath, we stepped into the unknown. As we moved, the brightness followed, trailing behind us like a comet in the dark sky. The world outside was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that hinted at something terrible lurking beneath. The moon hung low, casting an unsettling glow over everything, and the trees, twisted and gnarled, seemed to whisper secrets to one another. Soon we reached the forest edge, its darkness beckoning us with a chilling embrace. I hesitated, my heart racing. The memories of the angry shadows flooded back. What if we couldn't push them away again? What if they were waiting for us? Stay close, I whispered, trying to mask my fear with determination. We pushed through the brush, and the cold air wrapped around us, biting at my skin. As we ventured deeper into the woods, suddenly the atmosphere shifted. The once soft whispers of the trees turned into a low growl, like a beast awakening from a long slumber. The shadows around me grew restless, shifting uneasily as if sensing the change. What's happening? I asked, fear creeping back into my voice. Something is wrong, the boy replied quietly, his eyes scanning the darkness. We must move quickly. We pressed forward, hearts pounding as the shadows around us thickened. Unseen eyes were watching from the darkness, and I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. The air grew colder, carrying a stench of decay and despair. It twisted into a tangible force, attempting to suffocate us. I focused on the glowing light we shared, using it to push against the darkness as we continued. But then, without warning, a chilling howl echoed through the woods, freezing me in place. It rang out like a siren, and I knew it was a call to the lost souls, a summons to something wicked. What was that? I gasped, panic rising in my chest. Stay together, the older shadow shouted, gripping my hand tightly. I squeezed back, feeling the tension in the air rise. The howl grew louder, joining with distant wails that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth, creating a symphony of despair. Then I saw them. Shapes began to slither through the trees, thick shadows writhing and twisting, morphing into grotesque forms that resembled the lost souls I had seen earlier but twisted into horrifying parodies of their former selves. Their eyes glowed a fierce red, filled with wrath and sadness. Run! I yelled, yanking the group forward just as the shadows lunged at us, their movements fast and horrifying. We darted deeper into the forest, the howl echoing behind us, urging the angry shadows onward. Branches snagged at my clothes and skin, tearing me as we rushed to escape. They're right behind us. I could feel their breath against my neck, cold and filled with malice. But the light we carried began to flicker, dimming with each passing moment. I felt it. The shadows were trying to snuff it out, to consume us completely. No. I shouted, drawing upon the energy from within. Stay with me. I could almost feel the forest itself responding, the trees shifting as if they wanted to shield us from the approaching darkness. I could see a clearing ahead, a burst of light breaking through the trees. There, I cried, pushing forward with everything I had. Just as we rushed into the clearing, I turned to face the oncoming shadows. The light surged from us, pouring out like a shield. The angry shadows stopped, howling in rage as they clashed against the warm barrier. Their screams pierced the night, shrill and unending. It won't hold for long, the boy warned, his face pale with fear. We have to do something. My mind raced. What if we help them too? I suggested, remembering their anguish. In order to save ourselves, we need to guide them through their pain. The older shadow agreed, her voice steady despite the chaos around us. The angry forms hesitated, their howling fading into restless murmurs. Listen, I shouted, my voice echoing over the chaos. You don't have to stay like this. You can let go. For a moment, the shadows hesitated, their glowing red eyes flickering, wavering between anger and sorrow. I could see their pain morphing into confusion, and in that brief moment, I felt a shift. They need the stories. I realized, grasping onto this fragile hope. We can share our light and give them a chance to heal. As I steadied my breath, I began to tell them about the shadows we had freed, the boy, the lost souls, the power of their stories that brought light in the darkness. I spoke about forgiveness and love, about letting go of regret and embracing the joy of memories. Beside me, the others joined in. One by one, they shared their tales, weaving a tapestry of light and shadow. The clearing pulsed with energy, the light brightening as our words flooded the air, infusing it with warmth and hope. As we spoke, the angry shadows slowly began to change. The fierce expressions on their faces softened, and the red glow dimmed, replaced by faint flickers of color, green, blue, hints of warmth. I could see the grief and regret in their eyes as they listened, their forms starting to shimmer. The howling faded to silence. The shadows stopped lunging at us, now standing still, captivated by the stories unfolding around them. The atmosphere shifted, no longer dense with malice, but thick with longing and desire to be seen. Let us help you find peace, the boy urged, his voice trembling. We can share your stories and you can find freedom. As if stirred by his words, the largest shadow stepped forward. Its shape shifted, showing the outline of a man, tall and broken, eyes filled with sorrow. I lost everything, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know how to let go. The shadows around him recoiled, but I could feel sympathy in the air. It's okay, I replied gently, reaching out towards him. We're all lost sometimes, but we can help you remember the good. With a nod, the shadow began to speak, its voice growing stronger as memories flowed out like a river. Tales of laughter, of love lost too soon, a family that once was. As he spoke, the light surged again, spreading warmth and healing through the clearing. More shadows began to open up, revealing their stories as well. A girl explained her dreams, bright and beautiful, before darkness snatched them away. An older woman spoke of the joy she once shared with her husband, love radiating through their memories. The deeper we grew in their stories, the more the angry shadows transformed. Faces lost in anguish began to soften, showing signs of relief. But just when I thought we were breaking through the darkness, the ground beneath us shook. The angry wails returned, echoing ominously through the clearing. I looked around in terror, realizing that something wasn't done yet. Stay strong, I cried, holding tightly to the others. We can't give up now. The ground trembled as the shadows began to shift again. The light flickered, and in that moment of uncertainty, I saw the darker shapes creeping back toward us. They rushed into the clearing, merging with the shadows of lost souls. I gasped as anger twisted their forms again, and the howls surged, drowning out our voices. No, I shouted, desperation clawing at me. Stay with us. But the shadows reached toward the angry ones, their once. Soft glow dimming as desperation seeped back in. I could feel the burning intensity of their fear overpowering the fragile light we had built together. We can't let them take you, I yelled, feeling panic rise. Fight back. Rallying every ounce of strength, I held my ground, insisting that we stand tall against the impending dark. I stepped forward, heart racing, raising my voice above the chaos. Remember who you are. In response, the shadows hesitated, wavering just for a moment. I saw their eyes flicker as the angry forms surged towards us. With a surge of determination, I took the boy's hand and led the group toward the heart of the chaos, where despair seemed to swirl the strongest. Feel the light within. I shouted, hoping it would reach their hearts. Let it guide you. And as if summoned by my words, a blinding light erupted from the center of our group, washing over us and illuminating the haunting shadows that surrounded us. The ground shook fiercely and I stumbled back, but the warmth pressed against me like a steady embrace. The angry shadows cried out, their voices blending into a heartbreaking wail, but this time the sound transformed, morphing into whispers of sorrow and regret. One by one, the angry ones hesitated, their fierce red eyes dimming as they recalled their lost stories. I watched, breathless, as the light began to break through the darkness. The shadows flickered, revealing glimpses of their pasts, their painful memories pouring out in colorful bursts. It was as if the light had awakened something deep within them, a desire to break free from their torment. See? You can feel it, I urged. Embrace the warmth. Remember who you were. As they hesitated, the red faded completely, colors finally merging back into the shades of warmth and light. Together, the angry shadows started to shed their darkness, revealing lost souls still searching for solace. The anger in their eyes transformed into softness, a bittersweet realization of who they were and what they had lost. We don't want to be trapped anymore, the tall shadow murmured, his voice now a gentle tremor. We want to find peace. The clearing erupted with energy, the shadows surrounding us shining brighter than ever before. I felt the warmth of hope envelop us like a cocoon as we held onto one another with unyielding strength. But the darkness was not finished yet. Above us, storm clouds gathered, swirling ominously as shadows flickered in and out of view. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down again, a tension that was almost unbearable. We have to keep going. I urged again, determination rising. Don't let the darkness take over. With every ounce of courage pouring from within, I faced the gathering shadows around us, ready to fight for every soul still lost. Together we forged our way back, pushing against the tide of anger and sadness, refusing to yield to despair. As the storm raged above, the whispers of the forest grew louder, echoing our resolve. It was a gathering of life and memory, light and shadow blending together. And though fear loomed in the distance, I held tight to the warmth shared between us. I knew we could push through the darkness, we could forge a new path toward hope, reminding every lost soul of the stories we all carried within. This battle wasn't just for us, it was for every shadow still waiting in the dark, longing to be seen and heard. I felt the spark of courage ignite within me. We would win this, together. With laughter, love, and shared strength, I knew we were changing the tide of fate itself. The night would not swallow us whole. With each step forward, the weight of uncertainty pressed on me. The storm clouds above churned with an ominous energy, like a brewing tempest ready to strike. My heart raced, feeling the darkness crawling closer, each shadow whispering threats that sent chills down my spine. The clearing pulsed with life and light, but I could sense the anger boiling just beyond the threshold, waiting almost patiently for the moment to break free. I felt the shadows around me flicker in response, their hope fragile but real as we stood at the edge of the unknown. Stay alert, I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. It felt like the quiet before a storm, and I could almost taste the tension in the air. The boy beside me nodded, eyes wide with fear, but a spark of courage was beginning to ignite. Suddenly, the howl filled the air again, but it transformed into a chilling chorus, like 1,000 voices rising in anguish. Each note reverberated through the clearing, echoing off the trees and darkening the sky. The shadows that were once trembling began to gather strength once more. What do we do? One of the shadows asked, his voice trembling with panic. I could feel the despair creeping in. The anger of the dark ones below us was palpable, boiling over like a pot about to explode. I steeled myself, knowing I had to keep the momentum. We breathe life into their stories. We remind them who they were, I urged, wishing I could fully grasp the fear hanging in the air. But the shadows were growing restless again. I felt dark tendrils snaking through the ground, reaching out toward us like long fingers searching for something to grip. I shuddered at the thought, glancing down as the icy strands wrapped around my feet, pulling me closer to the ground. Help! I shouted, trying to break free as the shadows coiled tighter. I looked at the boy, desperation flooding my voice. We can't give in to it. We must stay strong. With a sudden burst of energy, I yanked my feet free, but the dark tendrils lashed out, snapping like whips. I stumbled back, just as a figure emerged from the swirling darkness. It stepped into view, tall and menacing, its face obscured by shadows with hollow eyes that glinted like glass. A figure cloaked in despair and anger, the embodiment of every lost soul that had succumbed to the darkness. "You cannot save them," it hissed, the sound like rustling leaves mixed with a chilling wind. The shadows around me quivered with fear, and I felt my own heart lurch. "No," I shouted back, gathering all my strength. "We will not let you win." But doubt crept in. What if it was right? What if we could not save those still caught in torment? Just as I faltered, the glowing light flickered, dimming under the weight of looming shadows. The figure lunged forward, and I barely managed to dodge its grasp, a chilling touch flaring through the air, sending my heart racing with dread. I looked back, seeing the shadows echo the figure's movements as they seemed inspired by its darkness. "Stay with me," I breathed to my companions. I could hear their breaths quickening as well, sensing their fear. "Remember your stories." At that moment, the taller shadow stepped forward. "I won't let them take me." It stretched its hand out to show a shimmering light. "I remember my joy. I will not be afraid." The glow brightened, nearly blinding me. The figure hesitated but then let out a deafening roar, shaking the ground beneath our feet. "Foolish souls, trapped in your delusions," it screeched as the tendrils gnashed and recoiled at the lighter shadow. Desperation coursed through me as I took another step forward. "You don't have to stay angry. We can help you." But the figure lunged again, and the shadows became a swirling mass of chaos, darkness colliding with light in a frenzied dance. The very air thickened, pressing down on us like a weight, making it hard to breathe. "Run!" I cried, pulling my friends with me into the heart of the cacophony. "We have to break through." We stumbled forward, the clearing erupting into a nightmarish dance as the echoes of souls collided with our cries, turning the night into a storm of sound. I felt the shadows gripping at my ankles, dragging at my very essence, threatening to pull me under like quicksand. But I forged onward, pushing through with every ounce of will. I could feel the light around me stretching, expanding, and the desperate shadows close by began to pull away from the darkness. The shadows hesitated, glancing back as if caught between two worlds, the brightness of memory and the cold grip of despair. "You can fight it," I shouted, hoping to reach them. As if ignited by my words, the glowing shadows surged around me, their forms flickering in a dazzling dance of colors. The large figure bellowed in rage, and I knew it could not contain its wrath much longer. Suddenly, piercing screams sliced through the storm. It felt like knives through the very fabric of our reality, the agony of countless souls crying out for help. "Help!" they echoed through the forest, the dark figure shrieked, drowning out everything. I couldn't tell if the cries were coming from the shadows around us or from the depths of the darkness itself. Time slowed as I took in the faces forming within the haze, twisted and contorted expressions of anguish, eyes wide with fear, memories storming to life within a swirling haze. Then I heard a familiar voice within the chorus, quietly weaving its way through the chaos. "Help us, help us." A shiver ran down my spine. I recognized that voice, a part of my past clamoring to break free. It belonged to a friend I had lost, someone who had been swallowed by the shadows long ago. "Don't let the darkness take you," I screamed, the desperation rising in my throat. I could feel tears prickling at my eyes, raw emotion igniting my voice. "You are not alone. We are here." Suddenly, the giant figure lunged forward, snapping at me with fury, its hands grasping toward the heart of the light. I dove to the side, barely dodging its strike. The air crackled, fierce energy swirling around me. We huddled together, the warmth of our shared light flickering in the storm's eye, but I could feel our strength weakening. The figure loomed over, a dark mass intent on devouring our hope. The tendrils snaked around us, their icy grip trying to pull us apart, each whisper edging toward despair. I felt shadows creeping closer, even the illuminated ones beginning to falter under the dark weight. "Tell me your stories," I shouted again, my voice cracking like thunder. "Remember who you are. Remember the warmth of light." The shadows began to murmur, encouragement and fear blending as memories surged forth. I watched in shock as their forms began to reshape and shift, mixing together, light and darkness colliding, creating a dazzling light show amid the chaos. The dark figure staggered, faltering under the weight of their collective memories, but I could see it gathering its strength again, ready to strike. "You will never escape," it shrieked, and in that moment, I felt its anger wash over me in a wave of despair. "There's still hope," I called out, reaching toward the shifting forms of my friends. "Together we can defeat this." With that, I pushed the light forward, letting it radiate from my core. Hands clasped tightly, I led our group forward, urging the shadows with me. "Lux in tenebris," I said, repeating the phrase I had heard in tales, igniting a sense of power within. The shadows shivered in response, and I felt their stories intertwine with my own. We shouted with one voice now, a unified cry that resonated through the very fabric of existence. Lux in tenebris, the chorus echoed back, our bond growing as we surged toward the dark figure. The glowing light twisted and sparkled, washing over the darkness like a wall of illumination, the shadows doing the same around me. But just as we made contact, a wave of cold washed over me. I felt lost again, the dark figure shifting, its eyes flashing. Shadows wove together, its form becoming sharper, more menacing than before. Hope is a lie, it roared, and I could feel its contempt crawling inside me. It was an echoing reminder of every doubt, every fear I had ever held. You are not enough. You cannot win. This will be your end. But I could feel the light rising within, a warmth spreading through my veins. I couldn't let it win. No. I shouted, casting my fears aside, drawing from the memories of the shadows around me. In that moment, I pushed everything I had into the light. A brilliant, radiant shower of stories, memories, ambitions, and fears intertwining, merging into a beacon that shot out into the storm. Follow me, I yelled, leading us all against the dark. We are powerful together. With a crack, the darkness began to break, and I felt the ground trembling beneath us as the shadows finally released their grip. For a fleeting moment, everything stilled as if the world held its breath, caught in the balance between light and dark. I could sense the dark figure faltering, its edges beginning to dissolve. And then an explosion of sound shook the very fabric of reality. A blast of light rippled through the darkness, incandescent and alive. I glanced around, and the shadows surged forward, each one pouring their light into the radiant glow. As the barrier of light expanded, I felt a surge of hope crash through me. I couldn't believe what was happening. Together, we pushed against the storm, against the darkness that sought to consume everything we were, our voices rising in unison, united against despair. And with one final rush of determination, the dark figure shrieked, its form evaporating into wisps of shadow that drifted away like smoke in the wind. The storm above shattered, light pouring down like rain, washing over my skin in warmth. I gasped, falling to my knees amid the remnants of despair, tears of relief streaming down my face. Breathing heavy, I looked around. The shadows were transformed, shimmering now with the colors of life. Their faces now clear, full of warmth and hope, each one glowing with a soft light as they gazed back at me with gratitude. Together, we had fought against the darkness, forging bonds through every story shared, and in that moment, I realized my own stories had been reborn too. We were not just shadows anymore. We were a tapestry of light, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope could flicker to life again. It was a new beginning, and I knew our journey wasn't over yet. Standing with the shadows, I felt the vibrant energy swirling around us, the forest alive again with a gentle rustle. It was a promise of healing, the sounds of the night now a symphony of life, resonating deep within me. And as we made our way out of the forest, I could feel the weight of stories shifting in my heart, ready to be shared. The shadows and I were bound together by every struggle we had faced, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. But deep down, I knew not every dark shadow had been lifted. New tales still awaited in the forgotten corners of the world, and as I stepped beyond the forest, I felt a new flicker of uncertainty arise. What other stories awaited me? What other shadows lurked just beyond the edges of light? And would I be ready to face them again, knowing there were still more lost souls waiting to be freed? And as those questions danced in my mind, the feeling of adventure ignited once more. I had found courage, I had discovered hope, and together we would wander wherever the night might lead us next. I stepped beyond the forest, my heart still racing. From the battle we had fought, but a new unease gripped me. The air felt different now, thick and heavy like a blanket of fog that wrapped around my chest. I could still hear the remnants of the storm crackling in the distance, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the shadows. The path ahead was dimly lit, overhanging trees casting sinister shapes against the moonlit sky. As my companions shared relieved glances and quiet words of comfort, I felt a shift, a chill creeping under my skin, an unsettling awareness that our escape wasn't going to be as simple as I hoped. Something pulled at the edges of my mind, whispering doubts of unseen dangers lurking close by. The forest had been so full of life, but now it felt like a different world was waiting, one carved from nightmares. I could almost hear the laughter of the shadows teasing me, reminding me they still had a hold over some lost souls. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, I caught movement in the trees. A shape darted across the path, almost too quick to see. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. Everything else faded away, it was just me in that flicker of shadow. "Did you see that?" I whispered to the boy, but when I turned to him, he was already staring off into the trees, eyes wide with fear. "It's here," he said, trembling. "Something is watching us. I can feel it." A sense of primal dread washed over me. The atmosphere thickened, making it harder to breathe. The darkness seemed alive, snaking through the trees like a serpent, curling around the trunks, watching, not with eyes but with an unyielding presence. I stepped forward slowly, every instinct in me screaming to turn back. The shadows shifted underfoot, tangling with the roots and rocks, forming a treacherous web that felt like it was beckoning me. "Stay behind me," I warned, forcing my voice to remain steady. As I moved deeper into the path, the trees closed in tighter, branches clawing at the night sky. A cold wind rustled around me, carrying the scent of damp earth mixed with something far worse, a putrid smell that made my stomach turn. It was a stark reminder that not all shadows were ready to be released. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the silence, echoing through the trees, and I froze. It wasn't a cry of anger or pain, but something more chilling, an otherworldly wail that sent ripples of fear through my body. I felt the very ground vibrate with every echo, and I instinctively grabbed the boy's hand tighter. "What was that?" he asked, barely able to keep his voice steady. "I don't know," I replied, fear clawing at my insides. "But we need to be careful." My heart raced as we pressed forward, the darkness seeming to close in tighter with every step. The trees began to twist, their branches contorting into grotesque shapes, fingers reaching out to us like skeletal hands. I felt their touch at the edge of my mind, nagging like an itch I couldn't scratch. Every shadow stretched longer, twisting into forms that lurked just beyond the periphery. I could almost make out faces if I focused hard enough, haunted expressions filled with sorrow, pain, and something darker. Then I heard the whispers, faint at first but growing louder, swirling around us like a gust of wind. "Stay, stay, stay," it echoed, each word dripping with longing and despair. "We should turn back," the boy murmured, his voice trembling. But I shook my head, instinct driving me forward. There was a pull, something compelling me deeper into this strange realm, despite the creeping dread that clawed at my thoughts. As I ventured further, I caught sight of something glimmering ahead, a flicker of light breaking through the oppressive darkness. Drawn to it, I moved cautiously, the whispers growing more frantic. "Stay, stay," they urged, and I could feel their desperation coiling around me like tendrils, squeezing the resolve from my heart. There, at the edge of the path, lay a circle of stones, each glistening with an eerie light, illuminating the ground. But something was off. The stones were covered in a thick layer of grime, almost like they had been forgotten. The moment I stepped closer, a chill ran down my spine. The light from the stones flickered wickedly, unveiling shadows that rushed forward in a wave, pouring out from the depths of the trees. They were not merely shadows now but grotesque figures with twisted limbs and hollow eyes. "Run!" I screamed, adrenaline surging through me as I turned on my heel. The boy was right behind me, but I could feel the cold breath of those figures gaining on us, hungry and relentless. The forest erupted in chaos. The trees groaned as if they were awakening, branches snapping like fingers reaching for us as we dashed through the underbrush. My feet stumbled over roots, my heart hammered in my chest, the whispers growing louder, a cacophony of anguish and rage. Back on the path, the figures swarmed around us, their shapes breaking apart only to reform into new, twisting forms. I could hear their voices rising, mingling into a tortured chorus. "Join us, join us," they sang, echoing through the gloom. In that moment of terror, I felt the shadowy tendrils curling around my ankles, threatening to pull me down. I fought harder, but the grip was strong, dragging me backward. "No, I won't," I gasped, shaking my head violently, summoning whatever strength I could muster. The boy reached for me, his hand slipping through my fingers as panic tightened my throat. "I'm trying. Just hold on." But the words echoed hollow, drowned in the rising tide of despair. I could feel the coldness creeping into my bones, the shadows latching onto my body, siphoning the warmth away. It felt like I was being consumed whole. And then, in the heart of that darkness, I remembered the light. "Lux in tenebris," I shouted, ripping the power from deep within me. Suddenly, a brilliant flash erupted, the shadows seeming to recoil from the radiance. The dark forms twisted with fury, screeching as they were driven back momentarily. I felt warmth flowing from my core, igniting a brilliant light that pushed against the encroaching darkness. But it was a fleeting moment. The shadows circled around, growing bolder as they gathered strength, and I realized I needed help. "Feel the light," I cried out, desperately casting my gaze to my companions. Together, we clasped hands and I could feel their energy merge with mine, a collective force igniting against the tendrils of darkness that sought to conquer our minds. As we summoned our memories and tales once more, the air thickened with vibrant colors, swirling into a whirlwind mixing light and shadow. But as the forms of the figures began to vanish, that ominous chill returned. The forest fell silent for a heartbeat, and then a low rumble echoed above us. It felt like the very ground was shaking, and I could sense something far more sinister rising from deep within. The terrifying realization hit me. The darkness was not just a mere shadow, it was a force of nature, a living entity that fed on fear and sorrow. It had been waiting, lurking for this moment to strike. "Run!" I yelled again, but this time my voice was laced with urgency. I could feel the darkness swirling around us, trying to consume our light, and I could see the fear etched on the faces of my friends. As we sprinted deeper into the forest, a thick fog rolled in, obscuring our vision, wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud. Every sound morphed into something sinister, the rustling of leaves, the snapping of branches both near and far. I felt eyes on me, countless unseen creatures watching, waiting, their intentions dark and unknown. "Stay together," I shouted, but my heart sank when I noticed a figure shrouded in mist, standing just off the path, its form shifting and shivering unnaturally. My breath hitched in my throat, dread settling in my bones. I wanted to look away, to push past it, but something in its hollow gaze held me captive. From that face emerged a whisper, a raspy allure that baited me into dawned memories. Join us," it echoed, dripping with the promise of forgotten dreams. But behind me I felt a presence far more palpable. One of the shadows had broken through, inching closer, eyes glowing like two fiery embers set against the gloom. It advanced slowly, the others at its heels, their whispers blending into a haunting melody. "No," I cried, pulling my friends with me. But the shadows moved faster, fear curling in my gut. My heart raced as I ran from that chilling whisper, the shadows gathering, masses of darkness shifting with dreadful intent. Suddenly, the fog swirled violently around us like a tempest rising, gnashing at our ankles as if trying to drag us back into the very depths of despair. Just when I thought all hope was lost, a flicker of light broke through the mist. It fluttered like a heartbeat on the verge of fading, calling to me from the depths of the chaos. Remember who you are." In that moment, I felt warmth flooding back, the memories of laughter and joy wrapping around me like a shield. I reached deep within, drawing from the light that had illuminated us so fiercely moments ago. "We are more than shadows," I cried. And as we stood our ground, the light began to envelop us again, swirling in a brilliant dance, and the whispers transformed into cries of fury. "No!" they howled, losing their hold over the very air. "Push forward," I bellowed, and we surged as one, breaking through the despair, illuminating the darkness around us. The light flared, blinding and beautiful, forcing the figures reeling back, their forms stretching and distorting as they collided with the radiant glow. But just as victory seemed close, a deafening roar ripped through the air. The ground shook violently beneath my feet, and I stumbled back, the world swirling around me as the darkness reared up in a final attempt to reclaim its power. "Stay strong," I shouted, feeling the weight of our collective memories anchoring us. The energy pulsed through me, and as the shadows lashed out, I could sense their desperation, their rage. They were fighting tooth and nail to remain. But we were not ready to yield. We pressed forward, our spirits entwined, determined to break the grip of despair that threatened to suffocate us. Each whisper became a battle cry, a connection to every soul that had felt the darkness' cold embrace. Yet even as we surged onward, I could sense shadows lurking at the edges of the light. They were gathering, a storm of despair ready to pounce at the slightest flicker of doubt. "Fight it!" I screamed desperately, conviction coursing through my veins. "Feel the light within us. Do not let the darkness win." And in that moment, as the shadows surged forward, I felt the weight of each story pressing against me, urging me to rise and remember that we were alive. That light was always worth fighting for, no matter how dark the night became. For we were more than echoes of despair. We were beings of light, and together we would illuminate the darkest corners of this world. No matter how deeply the night sought to engulf us, we would rise to meet it. With a final surge of strength, I broke free, the light radiating around us, pushing against the encroaching shadows. For every flicker of darkness that emerged, we stood resolutely against it, our spirits united once more. Yet even in this moment of triumph, I couldn't shake the feeling. What lay ahead? What new shadows awaited just beyond the darkness we had faced? The eerie whispers lingered still, a grim reminder that our journey was far from over. And as I turned my gaze toward the path ahead, I knew the tales and shadows we had encountered were just the beginning of a much larger story. I took a deep breath and pressed on, knowing the night was still alive with mysteries waiting to be unraveled. As I pressed on, the shadows began to retreat, but I could still feel their lingering presence, an uneasy murmur at the edge of my consciousness. The air grew colder, more oppressive, and the distant sound of rustling leaves seemed to carry with it a sense of foreboding. There was something deeper in the forest now, a darkness that felt almost sentient, like it was hatching in its hidden corners. The path ahead split into two directions, one winding towards the right, where a dense fog lay thick, and the other heading left, opening into a grove illuminated by pale moonlight filtering through the branches above. My instincts screamed at me to take the path bathed in light, but something darker, deeper, tugged at me to explore the fog. "Which way do we go?" the boy whispered, his breath trembling in the night air. I could see fear etched in his wide eyes, the uncertainty mirrored in my own heart. "Let's go left," I decided, feeling a spark of bravery ignite within me. "The light will guide us." We moved cautiously, keeping close, the gentle glow seeming like a shield against the creeping dread that surrounded us. But as we stepped into the grove, something shifted. The calmness of the moonlit clearing felt false, too serene in contrast to the darkness beyond. The shadows seemed to whisper secrets, an unsettling melody that danced on the wind. I squinted into the gloom, trying to discern any shapes hiding within. Suddenly, without warning, the trees surrounding the grove groaned ominously, their branches twisting and creaking as if they were alive. It sounded like whispers, echoing a language I could not understand, but I felt the chill run down my spine. An eerie silence fell as if the world paused, holding its breath. I gripped the boy's hand tightly, my heart pounding as I stared into the depths beyond. Just then, a shadow darted out from behind a tree, no more than a blur, disappearing into the fog on the right. "What was that?" he gasped, his eyes wide and fearful. I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. That feeling of being watched returned, prickling my skin. I could almost sense the shadows swirling around us, testing our resolve. And then it happened. A piercing scream cut through the silence, a sound filled with despair that seemed to wrap around us like a noose. It echoed, reverberating through the grove, stirring something deep within me. "Stay close," I said, my voice trembling. The shadows seemed to thicken, coiling around the edges of our sanctuary. The boy and I stepped back, searching the trees for the source of the cry. The fog began to twist, forming shapes that flickered at the edge of my vision, a swirl of darkness that threatened to engulf everything. "What if we're not alone?" he whispered, the fear in his voice cutting through the still air. Before I could answer, the trees started to sway, their movements eerie and unnatural. I felt the ground beneath us rumble slightly, a deep, guttural growl resonating from unseen depths. My heart raced as the fog began to swirl higher, forming figures that appeared and vanished like distant memories. Faces emerged within the mist, twisted and contorted in a mix of sorrow and anger. It was terrifying. I could feel their eyes boring into me. "What are you?" I pleaded, sensing the weight of their unfulfilled stories pressing against my chest. A chilling gust of wind blew past, and with it came the faint scent of decay, the kind that signaled something rotten was nearby. I recoiled, shivers racing down my spine. "We have to go," I urged, trying to pull us away from the grove. "Now." But as we turned, a dark figure stepped out of the fog, a tall, imposing shape with eyes that glinted like cold steel. The figure seemed to pulse with the shadows, a terrifying embodiment of fear itself. It loomed above us, its form flickering like a candle in the wind, stretching unnaturally toward the moonlight. "Join us," it murmured, its voice echoing like a chant through the grove. Instantly, I felt dread flooding into me, a wave of despair washing over my thoughts, threatening to drown my spirit. I shook my head fiercely, trying to repel the dark whispers curling around my mind, but they clawed at me, whispering memories I struggled to push away. "Fight it," I shouted, my voice barely loud enough to break through the all-consuming dread, but the boy hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes. "Stay with me," I urged, gripping his hand tighter, channeling every ounce of courage I had left into that moment. "We are stronger than this." The figure advanced closer, the shadows around it dashing forward like a flood, cascading over the ground, lapping at our feet, forming a dark tide that threatened to pull us under. I released a surge of light from within, but it flickered weakly against the dark, the shadows pushing back, hungry for our light. Just when it felt like we might be consumed, I caught a glimpse of movement behind the dark figure. A slender shadow slipped through the fog, stitching together murmurs of laughter intertwined with sorrow. Around us, the trees began to sway in mournful rhythm, and I realized we were not alone in this fight. The forest held its own history. With every ounce of determination, I called out to the spirits, inviting them to join our battle. "Stand with us," I bellowed. The moment those words left my lips, the shadowy laughter echoed louder, filling the grove with energy. Shapes flared to life, surrounding the dark figure, intertwining with the swirling fog, pushing against the shadows with cold, white light. Something shifted in the atmosphere, and I felt the balance of power begin to tip. The shadows shrieked, voices merging into a cacophony of despair, and the dark figure hesitated, flickering as if losing its form. "Together," I shouted, rallying the light around us, feeling the warmth of our collective memories gathering strength. I reached deep, pulling everything I could into that moment, the joys, the pain, every single spark of hope I could remember. As I poured my heart into that brilliant surge, the grove exploded with light, radiant energy blasting forth, forcing the darkness to retreat like water crashing against a dam. In that instant, the dark figure screamed, a sound that was both terrifying and freeing, the shadow collapsing inward on itself before exploding into a fine mist that evaporated into the air. But just as I thought we might have won, I felt an earth-shattering rumble echo beneath us, pulling the ground apart. Cracks formed in the earth, splitting the grove, the trees seeming to retreat in fear of whatever ancient being stirred below. I stumbled, my heart in my throat, as the fog thickened once more, swirling violently around us, transforming into a blinding tempest of shadows. The very atmosphere felt charged with static, pulsing with a life of its own, and I gripped the boy's hand tighter, fear coursing through my veins. "Run!" I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat, dragging us away from the desolation that threatened to consume everything in its path. The trees twisted and writhed as if they were alive, their branches snapping like bones in the night. Ahead, the path started to dissolve, the earth shifting beneath us. We had to push through, glimpses of dark figures slipped past us, ghostly shapes that promised despair, each flicker making my heart race faster. But out of the chaos, a voice carried through the fog, echoing with clarity above the whispers. "You can't escape fate," it boomed, chilling me to the bone. I could feel the shadows gathering around, beckoning us towards the lingering void of despair. With a surge of panic, I turned to the boy. "We can't look back," I urged, and we dashed forward through the enveloping darkness, feeling the weight of the shadows close in on us, feeling them clawing for the light within. Everything seemed to spin, the forest shifting haphazardly with each feverish step, dragging us deeper into a spiraling void. Each step felt heavier than the last as shadows clawed at my ankles, threatening to pull me into an abyss where light could never reach. My breath came in ragged bursts as we plunged further, pushing through the mist that felt like a suffocating blanket. Just when I thought we might break free, I felt a hand grasp my shoulder, cold and clammy. I whipped around, dread pooling in my stomach. But it was just a branch, gnarled and twisted, reaching out like a skeletal hand. I stumbled back, heart racing, and glanced around, realizing the trees were closing us in again. The voices grew louder, their cries like an encroaching storm, pulling us toward an unseen danger. "Stay together," I shouted, but I could feel the weight of fear settling over us, squeezing the light from our hearts. The deeper we went, the more frantic the whispers became, urging us to give in, to join them in the shadows. And then I saw it, a flicker, an opening beyond the trees, lit with an ethereal glow. I locked eyes with the boy, determination sparking within me. We rushed toward it, every ounce of fear propelling us, but the shadows howled behind us, furious and relentless. Just before we reached the glowing light, the shadows surged forward, wrapping around us like a vice, dragging at our hearts. I felt a darkness creeping into my mind, planting seeds of doubt and despair. "Don't let them in," I shouted with every breath, channeling all the strength I had, every memory of light and laughter, pushing my thoughts into a fortress against the encroaching dark. "No!" I screamed as the tide of shadows closed in, the figures swirling together, blurring the lines of reality. We were almost free, just steps away, but the darkness tightened its grip, threatening to pull us back. But we couldn't let it win. I summoned the last bits of light I could find, thrusting my hands forward as the spectral light erupted around us. The The shadows began to shriek, their chilling cries blending with the haunting melody of forgotten souls. With every ounce of strength, I tore through the darkness and stepped into the light beyond the trees, feeling a rush of freshness sweep over us. The grove faded into the distance, and as we crossed that threshold, I looked back. The shadows seemed to pause. Battered and recoiling from the light, they writhed in agony but didn't vanish entirely. They were still there, lurking just out of reach, threatening to swallow us whole if we dared to look back any longer. Looking ahead, I felt the darkness creeping back into my mind, taunting me with possibilities of despair. But the glow around me warmed my skin, and in that moment, I knew the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We had escaped one battle, but the war against the darkness loomed ahead. I could see it shimmering faintly in the distance, a road winding into ominous woods, the whispers already calling out to us from within. The memories of shadows danced before me, and I steeled myself, willing to face the next challenge. With the boy at my side, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. This was just the beginning, and somewhere in those depths, the next haunting story washed over with eerie anticipation, waiting to unfold under the trembling hands of fate. As I stepped into the glow beyond the trees, a shiver ran down my spine. My heart was still racing, but I felt an odd calm settle over me. It was as if the light wrapped around me like a warm blanket, shielding me from the horrors I'd just escaped. But even as I stood there, breathing in the fresh air, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching, waiting for me to let my guard down. The boy beside me looked around with wide, fearful eyes, taking in the swaying trees and soft glowing light. His hands trembled as he gripped my sleeve, the fear still evident on his face. "What was that place?" he asked, his voice shaky. "I don't know," I replied, forcing my voice to steady. "But we have to keep moving." We stepped further into this new part of the forest, the ground beneath us soft and earthy, as if we were walking on a path made of moss. The air around us was filled with strange sounds, whispers woven through the rustling leaves, a mix of laughter and crying that blended into one unsettling tune. "Do you hear that?" the boy asked, glancing back toward where we had just emerged. The shadows near the trees flickered ominously, their whispers rising and falling like an echo. "Yes," I replied, my stomach tightening. "But we need to focus on finding a way out. Let's not think about what's behind us." As we moved deeper, the light took on a different hue, pale blue and green tones danced together. I felt uneasy, unsure of where this path might lead. The trees grew denser, their trunks thicker and darker, as if they were guarding something lost in the depths. Around us, odd shapes started to emerge from the foliage, twisted branches resembling skeletal fingers reaching out, begging for something I could not understand. "Are you sure we're going the right way?" he asked, glancing up at me, his voice barely a whisper. "I think so," I said, though doubt began to creep into my mind. That's when I noticed something behind the trees, a shimmer just out of sight. It flickered like a dying flame, disappearing only to reappear with painful slowness, a heartbeat of light swallowed by darkness. "What is that?" I asked, my curiosity battling with fear. "I don't know," he said, his voice trembling. "But it can't be good." Against my better judgment, I took a step closer. The shimmer flickered again, and this time I caught a glimpse of what lay beyond. A figure hunched and twisted, with long gnashing teeth and eyes like two hollow suns. It stared back at me, its gaze piercing through the trees, and I felt the chilling essence of despair wrap around my heart. "Step back," I whispered urgently, pulling the boy close as I felt the temperature drop, a cold that seemed to seep into my bones. The figure melted into the shadows, leaving behind a suffocating silence. We turned to run, the shadows quivering as they responded to our fear. I felt a pull towards the darkness, but I resisted, focusing on the glow that remained in the distance. Just as I thought I'd broken away, I heard a crash behind me, a snapping branch, a howl that echoed through the trees, threatening to engulf us in darkness once again. "Run!" I shouted, feeling terror clawing at my throat. We took off, darting through the underbrush, the branches scratching at our arms like desperate fingers trying to drag us back. The forest was alive, transforming with each frantic step we took. I could hear the whispers gaining strength, twisting around us, mingling with the night air. "There's nowhere to go," the boy yelled, panic in his voice. I glanced back. The shadows were pursuing us now, moving faster, swirling together like a storm ready to unleash its fury. I pushed forward, desperation fueling my limbs. "We can't stop," I cried. The trees shifted unnaturally, creating ever-changing barriers, blocking our escape routes. The path ahead began to narrow, the light flickering ominously as branches began to intertwine, creating a living maze. My heart raced, pounding against my chest as if trying to escape the terror that gripped me. That's when I stumbled into a small clearing that seemed trapped in time. The moon hung high, casting an otherworldly light, illuminating a circle of stones arranged on the ground. Each stone was etched with strange symbols, glistening as if they were alive. It felt like the heart of the forest, but also like a trap, a place where darkness and light collided. "What is this place?" the boy whispered, stepping cautiously into the circle. "I don't know, but we should be careful," I replied, my instincts screaming at me to turn back. But before I could move, I felt a strange pull toward the symbols, a magnetic force inviting me to step closer. In that moment, the shadows surged again, spilling into the clearing like black ink over water. A low growl echoed through the grove, reverberating around us. The darkness was alive, swirling, forming a figure at the edge of the circle. "Join us," it hissed, its voice oozing with malice. I felt a sickening wave wash over me, drowning out my thoughts. It was like being wrapped in a heavy fog, memories of warmth and safety slipping away. The boy shuddered beside me, his grip on my arm tightening as fear overtook him. "No!" I shouted, shaking my head violently, trying to drown out the whispers creeping into my mind. "We won't join you." At that moment, the air cracked with tension, the shadows screeching in displeasure as if my denial was a direct blow to their existence. A blinding flash erupted from the center of the circle, dazzling yet terrifying, forcing me to shield my eyes. When the light faded, I saw the shadows recoil, retreating as if burned. But from that light, a figure emerged, radiant, ethereal. It looked like a spirit crafted from light itself, a beacon in the darkness. It hovered just above the ground, face serene yet filled with an urgent warning. "You must be strong," it urged, its voice soft yet resonating through the air. "Do not let the darkness take you. Remember who you are." "Who are you?" I asked, my curiosity fought against the pressing fear that clung to me. "I am a guardian of this place, a keeper of the light," it replied, its eyes shimmering with warmth. The shadows stirred violently, a cacophony of frustration that clawed at my mind. "I can help you, but you must trust in your strength." As the figure spoke, the shadows writhed, forming terrible faces that twisted in agony. The gnarled forms loomed closer, the darkness swirling, encroaching upon my thoughts. I felt their despair, raw and tangible, trying to draw me in, threatening to drown me in sorrow. "Remember who you are," the spirit echoed again, its voice pushing through the chaos. I held onto those words, feeling them dig deep within me, stoking a spark of resistance against the impending darkness. But even as the spirit reached toward us with its shimmering light, I felt the temperature drop even further, and the shadows surged again, howling in fury. My heart raced with dread. I wasn't sure how much longer we could fight against them. "The markings!" I suddenly exclaimed, pointing at the symbols etched into the stones. They pulsed with energy, inviting us to come closer. "Touch them," the spirit urged, its form shimmering as it hovered closer. With trembling hands, I led the boy toward the nearest stone. I pressed my palm against the cool surface, feeling the energy pulse through me, a warm glow spreading, filling the void left by fear. The moment our fingers connected, I felt a rush of memories flooding back, a wave of warmth that pushed against the cold darkness. Laughter, joy, moments of love and togetherness swirled around us, encouraging us to rise against the despair. The shadows writhed violently, shrieking in rage as our connection to the light blossomed. I felt our spirits intertwine with the symbols, forming a protective barrier, pulsing like a heartbeat against the embrace of darkness. "Keep going," the spirit urged as we pressed our palms against more stones. The power grew stronger, pushing back against the shadows that clawed at our ankles, threatening to pull us under. With every touch, I felt the weight of darkness retreat slightly, the hold it had over us waning as we shared our light. "We can do this," I shouted, fueling our courage, daring the shadows to come closer. The darkness swirled, angry whispers filling the air, a cacophony of despair and anger, but the light pulsed, growing stronger, fueling our determination. I could feel the boy beside me, his heart racing but resolute. Just as the shadows began to falter, I sensed a greater presence stirring, a deeper darkness lurking just beyond the shimmering circle. A ripple of terror spread through me, and I sensed that whatever was out there was even more terrifying than what we had faced thus far. "Stay close," I warned, the shadows around the grove shifting ominously as a deeper, darker figure emerged, creeping from the depths of the forest. It was larger, more formidable, with tendrils of shadow curling around it, reaching for the earth like skeletal hands yearning for life. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and I could feel the weight of its gaze crushing down on me, enveloping my mind in a haze of despair. "Join me," it rasped, its voice a slithering whisper that seeped into my bones. Every fiber of my being screamed to reject it, yet I felt a powerful pull. It was as if the darkness was offering me something I had longed for, acceptance, a place among its ranks. "No," I shouted, forcing myself to push against its suffocating presence. I could picture the light inside me, a roaring flame that refused to be extinguished. But the figure merely laughed, a chilling sound that reverberated through the clearing. "You cannot escape what you are," it boomed, reaching out with shadowy hands, attempting to wrap itself around me, a dark parenting that promised safety. I turned back to the stones, pressing both hands on two of them, feeling the radiant pulse meld with my essence. "We are more than shadows," I shouted defiantly, feeling a surge of strength wash over me. The spirit flickered nearby, urging us onward. The shadows screeched in retaliation, clawing viciously at the barrier we had created. I had to believe in our strength, in the memories that pushed me to fight back. The boy beside me gripped my arm tightly, his fear and determination intertwining with my own. With one final push, I called upon the brightness within every moment of joy, every spark of laughter I had known, drawing strength from our shared spirit. "Together," I bellowed, feeling our power explode through the clearing, a colossal wave of light that surged forward, pushing against the encroaching darkness. The shadow figure hesitated, its form flickering under the barrage of light. I felt the very essence of fear weakening, unraveling under our combined strength. The shadows began to wail, retreating further into the treeline, crashing against the barrier we had formed. But I knew this wasn't over. The deeper shadows still lurked, waiting for a moment of weakness, ready to strike when I least expected it. We had won this battle, but the war was far from over. I held the boy's hand tightly, realizing that we needed to keep moving. "Let's go," I shouted, redirecting my gaze toward the forest unfolding before us, a path illuminated by dim light and lingering spirits. The darkness still clung to the edges of the night, but as long as we held on to our light, as long as we fought together, I knew we could overcome whatever horrors lay ahead. Together, we forged onward, stepping into the unknown, prepared for whatever awaited us next in this twisted forest of shadows. The light that had once surrounded us began to flicker, dimming as thick clouds swirled above, blocking the moonlight. I felt the air grow heavy, as if the very forest was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to unfold. The boy beside me shivered, and I could see the fading glow of courage in his eyes. "What if it comes back?" he asked, his voice quivering with fear. I swallowed hard, knowing that the shadows were only waiting for the moment we allowed our guard to drop. "Just keep moving," I urged him, desperate to maintain our momentum. "We'll find a way out of this place." The path we followed began to twist and turn unnaturally, and the trees loomed over us, bending inward as if to close us off from the world outside. Each step felt heavier, every breath more labored. I could feel the shadows still lurking just beyond the edges of my vision, always creeping closer, hungry and relentless. Suddenly, a rustle in the underbrush made me freeze. I glanced down, and from behind a gnarled tree trunk, a pair of eyes glinted in the darkness, red and hungry. My heart dropped. It was a creature, small but sinister, with skin like brittle leaves and long, jagged teeth that glistened in the dim light. "It's watching us," I whispered, keeping my voice low. The boy stiffened beside me, his breath hitching in his throat. In that moment, the creature let out a high-pitched shriek, slicing through the silence, sending a chill down my spine. It dashed toward us, its limbs moving in erratic, unnatural motions. I instinctively stepped back, pulling the boy behind me. The creature darted between the trees, its body flickering in and out of sight as if it were a living shadow, a part of the darkness itself. "It's fast," the boy exclaimed, his eyes wide with terror. Before I could respond, the creature lunged forward, snapping its teeth just inches from my arm. I jumped back, adrenaline coursing through my veins, barely avoiding its bite. "Run!" I yelled, grabbing the boy's hand, and we took off down the winding path, heart pounding. We dashed through the trees, their branches clawing at us like desperate hands. The creature was behind us, nipping at our heels, its screeches echoing through the thick air. I could feel the shadows growing closer, the darkness swallowing the light as thunder rumbled overhead, sending a jolt of fear through me. "Don't look back," I shouted, focusing ahead as the path veered sharply to the left. We stumbled into a small clearing bathed in eerie moonlight, but even here the shadows were thick. The trees, twisted and dark, closed in around us, leaving us nowhere to escape. My gaze fell to the ground, where an ancient stone well stood, its entrance deep and foreboding. The air around it buzzed with an unsettling energy, a lingering dread that sent shivers down my spine. There was a strange sound emanating from inside, like the whispers of countless spirits trapped in the darkness. "Is it safe?" the boy asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," I admitted, glancing back to see the creature emerging from the trees, its eyes locked on us. It hesitated, then charged again just as I felt a pull towards the well, a temptation to hide from the horrors pursuing us. "We don't have a choice. Jump in," I ordered, without another thought. With a deep breath, I took the boy's hand and we leaped into the well together, plunging into the abyss below. The world above faded away, swallowed by darkness. The fall felt endless, the walls slick with moss and strange markings that glowed pale in the dim light. I grasped for something to hold on to as panic washed over me. Then, with a thud, we landed in a damp chamber. I gasped for breath, feeling the coolness of the stone floor against my skin. The air was thick with dampness, and I could hear the distant trickle of water. As I looked around, I saw shimmering veins of light running along the walls, illuminating the crude drawings and symbols. "Where are we?" the boy panted, glancing at me with wide eyes. "I don't know, but it feels strange," I whispered. And then, as I squinted into the shadows, I noticed movement. Out of the darkness emerged figures, ghastly shapes with twisted bodies and hollow eyes. They were ghost-like, flickering as if they were not entirely there. Their faces bore expressions of anguish and despair, and I felt a wave of sorrow wash over me as I realized they were echoes of lost souls, trapped and tormented within this dark place. "Help us!" Their whispers floated through the air, a haunting melody that sent chills down my spine. I recoiled instinctively, my heart racing. "We have to go," I urged the boy, pulling him to his feet. But as we tried to move back toward the opening of the well, the ground began to tremble. The shadows coiled around us, tightening like a noose, blocking our way out. "Stay!" a stronger voice echoed through the chamber. I turned, realizing one of the ghostly figures had stepped closer. Its translucent form shimmered with an otherworldly glow, eyes filled with sorrow yet somehow pleading. "Please, you must help us." "Help you?" I asked, confusion swirling. "We are trapped," it continued, gesturing around at the flickering souls. "Each of us was lost to the darkness, bound by the shadow's curse. Find the heart of the forest, only it can set us free." I hesitated, my heart pounding. There was a mix of fear and curiosity, an urge to help but uncertainty about how deep this darkness ran. "Why should we trust you?" the boy spoke up, his voice steady despite the fear in his gaze. "Because your light is what can break the curse," the figure replied, its voice growing stronger. "But time is running out. You must hurry. The shadows will not wait." A sense of urgency rushed through me. "What do we need to do?" "Follow the path deeper into the earth," the figure instructed. "Seek the heart of the forest, the place where light and shadow meet." With no other options, I nodded at the boy. "Let's do it." "Are you sure?" he asked, eyes darting around the chamber where shadows danced ominously. "Yes, we can't stay here. We need to help them," I said. "We fought so hard to get this far. I won't let fear stop us now." Hand in hand, we moved deeper into the chamber, following the faint trails of glowing symbols along the walls. Every step felt heavy in the silence, though the whispers of the lost souls surrounded us like a distant echo. As we wandered through the dim passages, the air grew thicker, almost suffocating. Shadows crept along the walls, and the whispers grew louder, begging for release, urging us to hurry. Suddenly, the ground beneath us shifted, and I stumbled as a hollow rumble echoed through the darkness. A cool breeze washed against my face, carrying a hint of decay and despair. "Keep moving," I urged, pushing forward, feeling the boy's presence still beside me. Finally, we reached a large cavern that opened before us, vast and intimidating. In the center stood a tree unlike any I'd ever seen. Its bark was blackened and twisted, reaching for the ceiling like gnarled hands clawing at the rock. But amidst the darkness, a brilliant light pulsated from its heart, a beacon that cut through the heavy air like a knife. The tree glowed with an eerie luminescence, radiating energy that beckoned us closer. "What do we do?" the boy whispered. "We touch it," I said, feeling the pull toward the light growing stronger. As we stepped closer, the shadows began to swirl around the base of the tree, hissing and whispering darker promises. "You'll regret this," they taunted, their voices sharp and biting. Ignoring their taunts, I reached out, placing my palm against the smooth surface of the tree. The moment I made contact, a shockwave of warmth surged through my body, like a jolt of electricity igniting my spirit. The light brightened, swallowing us whole, and the shadows shrieked, swirling violently around us. I felt my heart beat in time with the pulse of the tree, a powerful connection that flooded my senses. "Join us." The voices hissed, more desperate now, clawing at my mind, trying to break my focus. I pushed against the darkness with every ounce of strength I had, channeling the light within me into the tree, feeling it surge back, circling around me like a protective embrace. The shadows writhed, screaming in fury as the light expanded, illuminating the entire cavern. I could see the anguished faces of the lost souls drawn toward the light, their expressions turning from despair to hope. "Help us break the curse," they pleaded, their voices now a symphony of desperation. Driven by their cries and the warmth engulfing me, I closed my eyes and focused, pouring everything I had into the tree, refusing to let fear take hold. The shadows thrashed, losing their grip, and I felt a powerful force, a wave of energy rising and bursting forth like a supernova of light. Suddenly, the darkness exploded, sending tendrils of shadow scattering. The cavern shook, the tree pulsing with vibrant colors as the light engulfed the space, transforming it into a realm of brilliant brightness. When the light finally receded, I stood breathless, the boy by my side. The cavern was now a sanctuary, the tree radiant and whole, surrounded by the whispers of the freed souls who lingered, no longer bound by the darkness. "Thank you," they spoke in unison, their voices filled with gratitude. But I knew this wasn't the end. I could feel remnants of the shadows still lurking, waiting for an opportunity to strike. The boy looked at me, determination shining in his eyes. "What now?" "We must make sure the light stays strong," I replied, glancing around the cavern. "We have to find the source of the shadows, wherever they might be hiding." Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, ready for whatever awaited us next, knowing that as long as we held on to our light, we could face the darkness together. The cavern was a mix of shadows and light now, remnants of the battle still visible in the corners, dark wisps slithering along the stone walls like snakes. Yet the tree stood tall, its light bathing the space in warmth, and I felt a strength in its presence. But even with that brightness, I knew we were not safe. The deeper shadows still lingered, unseen but felt, watching us with their cold, hungry eyes. "Where do we go?" the boy asked, glancing around nervously. "We need to find the heart of the shadows," I replied. "That's where the darkness is strongest." With hesitation, we approached a narrow passage on the far side of the cavern. The air was thick, heavy with tension. As I stepped through, a shiver ran down my spine, and I could sense the shadow energy beginning to rise around us again, creeping into the corners of my mind, whispering doubts and terrifying uncertainty. I glanced back at the glowing tree, just a flicker of light now as the passage swallowed us further in. To the depths. The walls of the passage were damp and slick, oozing with a murky substance that reminded me of something rotten. The feeling of being watched clawed at my mind, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder constantly, half expecting the creature to leap from the shadows at any moment. As we moved deeper into the dark, the shadows thickened. I could hear faint whispers, lost voices weaving through the walls, and I strained to catch what they were saying. "Why did you come here?" one voice whimpered, low and haunting. "Leave while you can," another one echoed, filled with desperation. I shook my head, pushing the fears away. "They're just trying to scare us," I said, but even I felt the doubt creeping in like an unwelcome fog. Then, as if sensing my wavering resolve, the shadows twisted and formed shapes, vague, indistinct figures that seemed to flicker at the edge of my vision. I could see their faces, twisted in anguish and despair, their mouths opening in silent screams, stretching the limits of their suffering. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to push forward. "We can't stop now," I urged, gripping the boy's hand tightly. "We'll find a way through this." But the deeper we ventured, the more intense the darkness became, as if the very air itself was alive with fear. The walls closed in around us, making it hard to breathe, and I felt the oppressive weight of the shadows pressing down, squeezing my chest. Suddenly, a sharp wail pierced the air, echoing throughout the passage. It was a chilling sound like a banshee's cry, and it sent ice racing through my veins. The boy froze beside me, eyes wide with terror. "What was that?" he breathed. I didn't have an answer. My heart raced as I strained to listen, but the echoes of despair surrounded us, crashing against my mind. Then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and close. "Run!" I shouted, pulling the boy with me as we sprinted down the narrow passage. the darkness closing in behind us ferociously. We stumbled over the slick stones, feet slipping as the shadows howled, swirling in fury around us. I could feel the cold breath of something sinister brushing against my neck, and I bit back a scream, urging myself to keep going. Just as I thought we were finally breaking through, the passage opened into a vast chamber, a terrifying sight that made my stomach drop. The floor was littered with remnants of broken vows, a mass of twisted roots, gnashing teeth, and glowing eyes piercing through the gloom. Horrific shapes emerged from the shadows, distorted creatures that looked like nightmares made flesh. They were creatures of despair, born from the shadows surrounding us, each one more grotesque than the last, laughing and shrieking in a cacophony of madness. They're feeding on fear. I yelled to the boy, realizing what had happened. The shadows had taken form, manifesting our darkest fears into horrifying reality. One of the creatures lunged forward, its elongated body spiraling through the air as it opened its mouth to reveal rows of jagged yellow teeth. I felt the heat of its breath against my skin and ducked just in time as it soared over my head. "Keep moving," I yelled, feeling the boy tugging at my hand, his grip tightening as he struggled to keep pace. We ran toward the far side of the chamber, desperate to escape the monsters that surged behind us, but the room distorted with every step, walls shifting and trapping us in a never-ending cycle of terror. Just when I thought we were done for, I spotted a narrow path leading up to a ledge. "There," I shouted, pointing up. "We can climb." Gritting my teeth, I heaved myself up, pulling the boy along with me. The creatures screeched in rage, their claws swiping at us as we scrambled, but I could feel the energy from the tree behind us flickering, reminding me that we weren't alone in this. The ledge felt solid beneath my feet, and I turned to face the chaos below. Swarms of the twisted figures filled the chamber, their ghastly faces contorting with rage and hunger as they clawed at the rock, desperate to reach us. "Don't look down," I whispered, pulling the boy closer. We had to find a way to banish them, to break the curse that had twisted this place into a nightmare. The whispers of the tortured souls hung in the air, the loss of hope palpable as I pondered what I could do. "What if the tree's light can help us?" the boy suggested, glancing down at the chaos below. "I think you might be right," I said, heart racing. "But how do we get it to shine down here?" Just then, the walls trembled again and the shadows surged, a massive wave that threatened to sweep us away. A deep rumbling echoed through the chamber and I stumbled, grasping for balance. "Climb higher," I shouted, urging the boy to scramble up the rocks. We reached another ledge, fingers scraping against the gritty stone as I looked around desperately. But the darkness didn't let up. It jumped higher, swirling around us like a storm. "Let's use the path of light," I suggested, recalling how I had touched the tree before. "If we connect to it, maybe we can channel it all the way." Suddenly, a piercing shriek erupted from the shadows, silencing my thoughts. The creature in the chamber had spotted us, its ghastly body twisting as it flung itself at the ledge. With a terrible crash, it slammed against the rock, splintering as pieces of darkness exploded into the air. I fell back, panic surging as I watched pieces of shadow scatter like mist through the cavern. The energy from the light flickered, almost extinguished by the overwhelming fear that enveloped us. "Focus," I whispered to myself, trying to gather my strength. "Can you reach the tree from here?" the boy asked, glancing nervously at the wild shadows swirling around us. "I'll try," I shouted back, gathering my will. I climbed up higher, seeking the connection to the tree's power, the heartbeat of light so vivid and compelling. With every ounce of strength, I reached into the shadows around me, pulling from the flickering energy that still glowed from the now distant tree. The shadows howled in rage, their presence swirling violently as I dug deeper, feeling the warmth of the light reaching back to me. "Together," I called, extending my free hand toward the boy. "We have to join our light." He reached out, and the moment our hands touched, a rush of energy surged through us both, an electrifying wave that spread like wildfire. A brilliant beam of blinding light erupted from our connection, shooting forth and illuminating the chamber, piercing through the veil of darkness. The shrieks of the creatures morphed into cries of agony, their hollow forms twisting and convulsing as the light consumed them. "Keep it going," I yelled, feeling the energy swelling around us, the shadows retreating into a furious haze. But then came a voice from the depths, a deep, resonating growl that filled my chest with dread. "You think you can escape me?" The shadows darkened, a figure materializing like smoke, clothed in the remnants of twilight. It towered over us, its form surreal and twisting, a wicked grin spreading across its distorted face. "You are nothing in my realm." My heart raced as I stared into its hollow eyes, fear flooding through me. I could feel its power, the overwhelming darkness squeezing my mind. "Stay focused," I shouted to the boy, tightening my grip. "We're stronger than it." In that moment, I remembered the warmth of the tree and the countless souls we had encountered. "We fight for them," I cried out, grounding myself in their memories, the light of hope, fueling my determination. The boy nodded, and our light flared once more, striking against the approaching shadows. With a roar, the darkness writhed and recoiled, but I felt its strength pressing harder, desperate to break our unity. "We can't let it win," I shouted, pushing against the weight of fear and doubt. The creature's form shimmered, and in a snap, it lunged forward, trying to break our hold. But we strengthened our resolve, pulling from the essence of the tree and the spirits we had freed. "Together!" we cried, sending a wave of light that collided with the darkness, the resulting explosion shaking the chamber to its core. The shadows screamed, and with one final push, we released all of our strength, using the energy of our bond to pierce through the heart of the darkness. Light and shadow met like a fierce storm, radiant beams cutting through the darkness, illuminating everything it touched. I could see the faces of the souls being freed as the shadows began to dissolve, disintegrating into wisps of gray, no longer able to hold onto their grasp. But even as the darkness shattered, the creature fought back, howling in fury and desperation as it collapsed under the weight of our light. "Don't let up," I yelled. As it roared, the earth trembled again, rupturing and shifting beneath us as the remnants of the shadows scattered, trying to escape the onslaught of our combined power. The chamber trembled, and I felt the ground sway dangerously beneath my feet, like a tempest rising within the depths. With one final glance at the monstrous figure, I turned back to the boy, determination set in my features. "We have to end this." Summoning every shred of hope, we pushed forward and released our light one last time, channeling everything we had into a concentrated beam that surged forward, unrelenting. The darkness heaved, writhing and twisting as the powerful wave crashed against it, and with a thunderous roar, the creature was consumed, disappearing into an explosion of shadow and light that enveloped the entire chamber. A moment of silence followed, the echoes of the battle fading into a hushed stillness. I held my breath, half expecting the darkness to linger, yet the air was clear, tinged with the freshness of newfound freedom. The remnants of what had been the creature began to dissipate into nothingness, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. As the glow of light flickered around us, we stood together, panting, uncertain yet hopeful. The shadows had retreated, their clutches weakened as the spirits shimmered around us, thanking us for breaking the chains that had bound them. "It's over," the boy breathed, and I turned to him, a smile creeping onto my face. "Yes," I affirmed, feeling the warmth of victory nestling in my heart. But I also knew, as the shadows flickered at the edges, we couldn't let our guard down just yet. "Let's find a way back," I said, looking around the chamber filled with remnants of darkness. "We'll discover how to ensure the light stays strong." Together, hand in hand, we stepped forward into the light of a new dawn, ready to continue our journey, knowing that no matter what horrors awaited, we had each other to face them. We moved carefully through the shifting shadows, our resolve growing stronger. We would uncover the secrets lurking in the corners of this haunted place and restore balance once and for all. The path ahead was still long, yet with every step, I felt the light within us grow, filling the cavern with hope as we delved deeper into the unknown, prepared to confront any terrors that dared cross our path. We moved carefully through the shifting shadows, our resolve growing stronger. We would uncover the secrets lurking in the corners of this haunted place and restore balance once and for all. The deeper we ambled, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. The light flickered erratically, casting long, eerie shadows that danced on the cavern walls. I felt cold spots brush against my skin, like icy hands reaching out to grip me, sending a chill of dread down my spine. The whispers returned, more urgent now, swirling around us, trying to invade my mind. "Leave while you can," they murmured, echoing in my ears like a sinister chant. Suddenly, the air grew thick with fog, swirling like a living entity, clogging my throat and making it hard to breathe. I stopped, my heart thumping loudly, the boy beside me glancing nervously at the growing haze. "What is that?" he whispered, clearly frightened. "It's just mist," I said, though deep down my instincts screamed otherwise. As we carried on, the shadows began to shift again, stretching and melding into grotesque forms. Faces twisted in pain, eyes wide with horror. It felt like they were watching, hungry for our fear. I felt a wave of panic rise within me as I turned to look back, but saw only the dense fog swallowing the light behind us. The whispers intensified, clawing at my thoughts until I could barely think straight. "You shouldn't have come here," they hissed. "You don't belong." Suddenly, a figure emerged from the fog, tall and dark, cloaked in shadows. Its hollow eyes glowed a deep crimson, piercing through the mist as it advanced toward us, its form shifting and undulating like smoke. I felt my breath hitch in my throat, terror freezing me in place. "Run!" my instincts screamed, but I was rooted, unable to move. The boy grabbed my arm, pulling me back to reality. "We have to go," he urged. In a rush, I turned and ran, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. The shadowy figure pursued us, its presence suffocating, an overwhelming darkness that threatened to swallow us whole. With every step, the shadows closed in tighter, grasping at my legs like icy fingers seeking to drag me back. I tore my gaze away from the cloaked figure and focused on the path ahead, barreling into the dense fog as I stumbled forward. The echoes of tortured souls reverberated through the cavern, chilling me to the bone. An unearthly wail rose around us, and I felt the ground tremble as if it were alive, thrumming with the chaos of our frantic escape. "I can't keep running like this," the boy gasped, his breath coming in sharp bursts. "What if it catches us?" I knew we had to be close to something, a way out or a final stand against the darkness. "We can't give up now," I shouted back, every bit of fear igniting the fire in my chest. "We have to find the light." As we dashed through the thick mist, I caught sight of what looked like a glimmer up ahead, something shining against the darkness. It flickered uncertainly, like a candle in the wind, weak yet persistent. "There!" I cried, but just as we drew nearer, the shadows erupted around us, moving faster, swirling in a frenzy. The shadowy figure loomed larger behind us, its growl vibrating through the air like thunder. I felt terror clawing at my chest, threatening to overwhelm me as the wails of tortured souls grew louder, demanding to be heard. They filled my mind with visions of despair, glimpses of their pasts, moments of suffering that intertwined with my own fear. What if this is the end? I thought in a moment of doubt, but the flickering light propelled me onward. With one last surge of energy, I lunged toward the glimmer. The moment I reached it, the air around us pulsed with warmth, like stepping into a sunbeam. I closed my eyes, letting the light wash over me and lift the weight of fear from my shoulders. But even as the light brightened, I could feel the shadows encroaching, clawing at the edges, desperate to reclaim their hold. "Quick, stand by me," I shouted to the boy as the shimmering light embraced us, holding off the darkness momentarily. I felt the connection with the tree, its energy flowing through my veins, strengthening our resolve. I raised my hands, pouring every ounce of hope into the radiant glow, pushing back against the clutches of despair. The shadows recoiled, hissing in rage as their twisted forms began to dissolve like smoke in a strong wind. I felt a surge of power, the light expanding as if feeding off our desperation and determination. With each moment that passed, the shadows shrank back, flickering nervously, their grip lessening as we held the light defiantly against the encroaching darkness. But then, the dark figure surged one last time, its voice booming with a mix of fury and desperation. "You think you can escape my realm? You will suffer for this." I could feel its hate, a malevolence that penetrated deep, threatening to unravel my grip on the light. "We are not afraid of you," I shouted, rallying my strength one last time. "We are stronger together." The light blazed brighter as if acknowledging my words. It erupted forth, blasting the shadowy figure with a radiant wave, illuminating the chamber until every corner was filled with brilliance. The shadows screamed, their visages twisting in agony as they faded into oblivion, their cries echoing away into nothingness. With a final roar, the dark figure collapsed, disintegrating into particles of shadow that scattered like ash in the wind. I felt the ground quake and tremble beneath us, and for a moment, it felt like the very fabric of the cavern was breaking apart, unraveling from the horror that had plagued it. Then silence enveloped us, a calm that settled over the chaos, like the eye of a storm. The glow around us dimmed but remained, casting a gentle light through the now clearing mist. I felt the heaviness lift from my heart, a sense of freedom emanating through the cavern as the remaining shadows fled, banished back to where they belonged. Turning to the boy, I saw the relief in his eyes, the tears sparkling like stars in the fading light. "Did we do it?" he whispered, and I nodded, a smile breaking across my face despite the exhaustion woven into my bones. "I think we did." My voice cracked slightly, filled with disbelief. We had faced the darkness together, brought the light back to this haunted place, and freed the tortured souls bound within. As we made our way back to where the radiant tree gleamed in the distance, I felt a warmth radiating from it. The souls of those we had freed swirled in a graceful dance around us, their soft, grateful murmurings filling the air. Their joy enveloped us, a soothing balm after the chaos we had endured. "I never want to forget this," I said quietly as we approached the glowing sanctuary. The boy nodded, a determined glint in his eyes. "And we won't. This place, the darkness, we'll make sure no one else has to face it alone." The tree pulsed gently, welcoming us back, its light shining brighter as if acknowledging our victory. But I knew the journey was far from over. We held our heads high, ready for the path ahead, understanding that we would face whatever nightmares awaited together. Nothing would stop us now.